When I opened the brown envelope and saw my husband's signature next to another woman's name, my hands went cold, not from shock, but from the kind of stillness that comes when your world stops moving. It was mid-sunlight spilling across the dining table, and my baby's soft breaths echoed through the monitor beside me. The house smelled faintly of chamomile and disinfectant, a scent that had comforted me through weeks of recovery. But in that moment, it turned sour. The deed. Our home, the one we spent 5 years saving for, the one we painted ourselves in the sweltering summer, was no longer ours, it was hers. Before all of this, my life had rhythm. Morning coffee with Daniel before work, weekend grocery runs where we'd argue over brands of cereal, laughter in the evenings as he told me stories from the construction site, always ending with that crooked grin that made me fall for him 10 years ago. We weren't perfect, but we were steady, or at least, that's what I thought. When I got pregnant, Daniel became softer. He'd rub my feet every night, whisper promises into my belly. I'll take care of both of you, always. He meant it. I believed he did. Then, the complications started. The doctor put me on bed rest in my 7th month. Minimal stress, no movement, no lifting, he'd said. Daniel insisted I move into the downstairs guest room. He took over the finances, the bills, even the grocery list. Just focus on the baby, he told me one night as he tucked the blanket around my swollen belly. His voice was gentle, but his eyes, I don't know. There was distance there I couldn't name yet. He began coming home later, saying he was handling extra work to save for our future. I didn't question it. I was too tired, too anxious about the pregnancy. I thought that's what love looked like. Trust. After our son, Nathan, was born, I nearly died from postpartum complications. 2 surgeries, 3 blood transfusions. My mother moved in to help. She would hum old church songs while feeding Nathan, her voice calm, her presence grounding. Daniel was there too though, if I'm being honest. Only in body. His phone never left his hand. He'd kiss me on the forehead and say, "You need rest," before stepping out for calls. At first, I told myself I was paranoid. Trauma can twist your thoughts. Maybe I was just grateful he hadn't left altogether. But there were signs. He changed the password on our joint account. For security, he stopped bringing me mail, saying he'd handle the bills. When I asked to review our mortgage payment just out of habit, he brushed it off. "Don't worry about that stuff, babe. You need to heal." Something about the way he said it made me feel small. Weeks later, when I could walk again, I started noticing little changes in the house. The framed photos from our honeymoon, gone from the hallway wall. A new perfume lingering faintly on his shirts, floral, not the laundry kind. One afternoon, I heard a text ping on his phone as he showered. The message preview read, "Don't forget to sign today. We're almost there." My heart thudded. My palms went damp. I told myself it could be work, maybe a project, maybe nothing, but my body already knew. When he came out of the shower, I asked, "Who's we?" He paused for a fraction too long. "Oh, that's just the client paperwork stuff." He smiled, the same crooked grin. I almost wanted to believe him. But that night, long after he'd fallen asleep, I sat in the dim light of my phone and searched through our email account, or rather, what was left of it. His name had been removed from every joint notification. Mortgage, bank, utilities. He had quietly rerouted everything. A chill ran through me. But fear can make you freeze, and I froze. A few days later, a letter came addressed to me, but Daniel was the one who received it. He slid it into his jacket pocket before I could even ask what it was. That's when my mother's eyes met mine across the table. "Baby," she said quietly after he left, "you sure he's telling you everything?" I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. The next morning, when Daniel went to work, I searched his office drawer. My fingers trembled as I flipped through receipts, old car papers, bank statements. Then I found it, a folder labeled transfer. I opened it. Inside was a copy of our house deed, with a new signature line waiting to be filed. The second name wasn't mine, it was Hannah Green. I didn't know who she was, at least, not yet. That night I pretended everything was normal. I made his favorite stew, wore the soft pink robe he'd once said he loved. He smiled at me across the table, told me I was glowing. I smiled back, even though my stomach twisted with quiet dread. After he went to bed, I called my mother into the kitchen. I showed her the folder. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, she sighed. "We need to find out who she is before you confront him." Her voice was steady, not angry, just sad, like she'd seen this before. The next morning, I searched our city's property registry online. My heart pounded as I typed in our address, The result blinked on the screen. Black letters on white dot, property owner, Hannah Green. I stared at it until the edges of my vision blurred. I wasn't crazy. He really did it. He gave our home, my home, to another woman, and I was still lying in the same bed where I'd almost died giving birth to his child. I remember sitting on the edge of that bed, staring at the soft blue curtains swaying in the breeze. Nathan slept beside me, his tiny fingers curling around mine. I should have cried, but I didn't. Instead, I felt this deep, cold quiet, a kind of silence that makes you start planning. Because if Daniel thought I was still weak, he was wrong, and if Hannah thought she could take my home, she was about to learn whose name still mattered. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, a notebook open between us. The sunlight fell across her face, highlighting the fine lines around her eyes, the kind that came from surviving too much, not smiling too often. First, she said softly, we find out who she is, then, we decide what to do. I nodded. My voice trembled when I answered, I'm not ready to confront him yet. Good, she said, pouring tea into my cup. You need proof, not just feelings. While Nathan napped, I started digging. Hannah Green. The name sounded young, too easy on the tongue. I searched her on social media, and there she was, a real estate agent, blonde hair, bright smile. Her bio read, helping families find their forever homes. The irony stung. Her page was filled with pictures of new homeowners, and one photo in particular made my stomach twist. Daniel, standing beside her at a property event, his hand lightly resting on her back. She'd captioned it, with my favorite client, always closing deals, and hearts. The comments section was full of laughing emojis, but one stood out. You two make such a power couple. I scrolled through more. There were photos of wine glasses, late-night dinners, sunsets. In every shot, I recognized something familiar. His watch, his jacket, even the bracelet I'd given him last anniversary. My throat burned. That night, I barely spoke. Daniel noticed. You okay? He asked, spoon halfway to his mouth. Just tired, I said. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing amazing. You know that. Once things settle, I'll take you somewhere nice. You deserve it. His touch felt foreign, like someone else was wearing his skin. For days, I lived like that, pretending, smiling at breakfast, nodding through his stories, tucking our son in while my heart screamed behind my ribs. Meanwhile, my mother quietly gathered documents, utility bills, bank statements, anything with dates and signatures. She called in a favor from her friend at the county clerk's office to get copies of the transfer records. The picture grew clearer, uglier. The transfer was made 2 weeks after Nathan's birth while I was still in the hospital. Daniel had filed the paperwork himself. He'd used our joint savings to buy out half the home, under the pretense of business restructuring. Then, he added Hannah as co-owner for investment purposes. Investment, that word hit harder than a slap. To him, I was just another line item, and she was his profit. The night I decided to confront him, it rained. Thunder rolled softly above our roof. Nathan had finally fallen asleep. The house was dim, except for the yellow glow from the kitchen lamp. Daniel came in late, dripping wet, smelling faintly of perfume and rain. I sat at the table, the documents spread before me. Hey, he said, surprised. You're still up? Yeah, I said quietly. Waiting for you. He hesitated, then walked closer. Everything okay? I looked at him, really looked. The man I'd loved for a decade. The man who once held my hand in hospital corridors, crying because he thought he'd lose me. What's her name? I asked. He blinked. What? The woman you transferred our house to? His face froze. A flash of something, panic, guilt, maybe both, flickered in his eyes. Then, he forced a laugh. You're misunderstanding something, babe. It's just business. Business. I slid the deed toward him. You signed it. You used our savings. You made her owner. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he said, it's complicated. Explain it. He rubbed his forehead, pacing. Look, Hannah helped me with a few investments. She said we could move some things around, protect our assets. It's temporary. Temporary. I repeated, voice rising despite myself. You made another woman part owner of our home while I was in the hospital. How is that temporary? He slammed his palm on the table. You don't understand how business works. I was trying to make things better for us. No, I whispered. You were trying to make things easier for you. The silence after that was heavy. He stared at me, his jaw tight. You shouldn't be going through my papers. You're not in any condition for this kind of stress. Something inside me snapped. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm fragile. You did this behind my back while I was fighting to stay alive. He looked away. I didn't mean for it to get this far. That was the moment I knew it wasn't guilt he felt. It was fear. Fear of being caught. I gathered the papers, slid them into a folder, and stood up. Get out, I said. He frowned. What, you heard me? Go stay with her. You've already given her half my home. You might as well give her the rest of your lies too. For a second, he looked like he might argue. Then, he grabbed his keys and left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like a final sentence. I didn't cry that night. I sat on the couch, holding Nathan, watching the rain streak down the window. My mother came down the stairs quietly and placed a blanket over my shoulders. He'll come crawling back, she said softly. They always do when the shine wears off. I looked down at my son, his tiny chest rising and falling. He won't find me waiting, I said. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no visits, just silence. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived, addressed to me. Inside was a formal notice, intent to reclaim ownership, property division pending. Daniel was trying to force a sale. I laughed, a small, bitter sound that felt like power for the first time in months, because what he didn't know was that I already had the proof and the will to fight. The first thing I did after reading that letter was call my mother into the kitchen. She came down, still wearing her housecoat, glasses perched low on her nose, her hair half-pinned. What did he do now? She asked before I even spoke. I handed her the letter. She scanned it once, then twice, her mouth tightening. He's got nerve. After what he pulled, he thinks he can push you out too. I nodded slowly. He's forcing a sale. He wants to liquidate the house and divide the proceeds. My mother set the paper down. No, baby, he doesn't want the proceeds. He wants you out. He wants a clean slate with her. I swallowed hard, not without a fight. Her eyes softened. Then let's make sure you've got a case. That afternoon, she drove me to meet her friend, Mrs. Patel, a retired paralegal who now helped women in messy separations. Mrs. Patel listened, quietly, as I told her everything, the transfer, the affair, the forged documents. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she folded her hands. You have leverage, she said calmly. If he transferred the deed while you were incapacitated and without your consent, it's fraud, especially since community property laws protect your marital rights. I blinked. So, I can get it reversed, with evidence and patience. Yes. The relief that washed over me wasn't joy. It was more like breath returning to lungs that had forgotten how to work. Over the next few weeks, I became someone else, someone sharper, quieter, deliberate. Every feeding session, every late-night diaper change, every 3 a.m. pump became part of a rhythm I was reclaiming. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. I gathered every record I could find, doctor's notes proving I'd been hospitalized, our old mortgage agreement, text messages, bank statements. My mother cataloged everything in folders. At night, when the house went still, I'd sit by the window, rocking Nathan to sleep. The world outside moved on. Cars passing, dogs barking, lives continuing. Inside, mine was rebuilding, one quiet moment at a time. Then came the knock. A Thursday afternoon, light rain outside. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there, hair unkempt, eyes shadowed. He looked tired but not broken, just inconvenienced. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside without a word. He looked around the house like he was seeing it for the first time. His gaze lingered on Nathan's toys, the new curtains my mother had put up, the small vase of fresh lilies on the counter. You redecorated, he said, as if that mattered. I crossed my arms. Why are you here? He hesitated. Hannah, she said you were spreading rumors. Rumors. I almost laughed. You mean the truth. He sighed. Look, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Things got messy. She pushed for the conurship, Daniel. I cut him off. You chose to sign those papers. Don't blame her for that. He looked down, rubbing his neck. I just needed help. Financially. She invested in my business. The deed was collateral. That's all. You used our home as collateral without my consent. He didn't answer. Then, quietly, he said, I can fix this. We can fix this. I'll talk to her. Maybe we can undo the paperwork if you just stop involving other people. I stared at him. You mean stop standing up for myself? His eyes hardened. You're making things worse, Emma. You're turning everyone against me. I felt my pulse rise, but I kept my voice calm. You did that all by yourself. He shook his head. frustrated. You always dramatize things. You think this is betrayal, but it's business. My laughter came out sharper than I meant. If it was business, you wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have hidden it while I was in a hospital bed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're not thinking clearly. You've been through a lot. I took a step back. Don't you dare use my recovery as an excuse for your choices. His jaw clenched. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, two strangers sharing a history. Finally, I said, leave, Daniel, and next time, talk to my lawyer. He blinked. You're what? My lawyer, I repeated. The one handling the fraud investigation. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. I already did. He stood there for a heartbeat, his eyes darting to the papers on the counter. Then, without another word, he walked out. The next day, Hannah messaged me, a short, polite text from an unknown number. Hi Emma, can we please talk? I think there's been some confusion. I stared at it for a while before replying. There's no confusion. You knowingly signed a deed for a married man's home. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. She never replied again. A month later, I received a letter from the county clerk, transfer reversal under review. Mrs. Patel had filed everything meticulously, and the investigation was moving forward. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was momentum. Daniel tried calling a few times after that. I ignored most of them. The one time I picked up, his voice cracked with desperation. I'm losing everything, he said. The business, the house, her. I closed my eyes. You already lost what mattered most. Then I hung up. One evening, my mother made stew, the same recipe she used to make when I was little. Nathan gurgled in his high chair, reaching for a spoon. The smell of garlic and thyme filled the kitchen. I realized, for the first time in months, I felt peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else's apology, the kind that comes from reclaiming your name. 2 weeks later, I got the final notice. The deed transfer was enough. The property was reinstated in my name alone. When I read those words, I cried. Not the messy, broken kind of crying, the quiet, grateful kind. I walked out to the porch, Nathan in my arms. The evening light stretched across the lawn, golden and forgiving. This is our home, I whispered to him. Ours. He laughed, as if he understood. That night, as I rocked him to sleep, I thought about Daniel, about all the years I spent believing his version of love meant security. I finally understood. Real love isn't protection that cages you. It's partnership that stands beside you. And when that partnership turns into betrayal, the only way out is through truth. That the news spread faster than I expected. In our small town, nothing stayed quiet for long, especially when it involved a marriage, money, and a woman scorned. It started with whispers at the grocery store. Then the whispers turned into phone calls. And soon even my old coworkers were messaging me, saying they'd heard something about Daniel. I didn't confirm or deny. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of speaking for itself. When the legal notice was published, Daniel's name appeared in the local record. Fraudulent property transfer, marital assets under review. People talk, they always do, but for once, I didn't feel shame. I felt seen. The first time I saw Hannah again was at the courthouse. She arrived before Daniel, wearing a beige suit and sunglasses too big for her face. When she noticed me across the hallway, she froze, then offered a faint, nervous smile. I didn't return it. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know he was still married. I tilted my head slightly. You did after I told you. Her eyes darted to the floor. He said you were separated, that you didn't want the house anymore. I wanted to believe that maybe she was just naive, that she hadn't meant to become part of my pain. But the ink on her signature told another story. Even if that were true, I said quietly, you still signed someone else's home into your name. That's not love. That's greed with lipstick. Her face flushed, and she turned away. When Daniel arrived, he looked smaller somehow. His suit hung loosely. His eyes had lost that confident spark I used to find magnetic. He didn't look at me when we passed each other in the hallway. He didn't have to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. In court. The judge reviewed the evidence, my hospital records, our financial history, the forged signatures. Daniel tried to speak something about miscommunication and temporary transfers, but his words fell apart under scrutiny. When the verdict was read, I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. The judge ruled in my favor. The property transfer is void. Full ownership remains with Mrs. Emma Lawson. All financial damages to be repaid by Mr. Daniel Lawson. It was over. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Hannah sank into her seat, pale and trembling. Daniel stared straight ahead, face blank, as if reality hadn't caught up yet. When I walked out, the autumn wind hit my face like a baptism. It smelled like rain and iron and endings. Over the next weeks, life quietly reshaped itself. Daniel moved out of town. His business collapsed. The same investment firm he built with Hannah went under after clients pulled out. Scared by the fraud charges, I heard through mutual friends that she left him soon after. He tried calling once more. I didn't answer. Some things don't need closure in words. My mother always said, karma doesn't knock, it walks in through the front door when the timing's right. And for once, she was right with the house fully mine. I started small, repainted the living room in soft cream, took down the old wedding photos, replaced them with pictures of Nathan's first smile. My mother's hands kneading dough. A sunrise over our porch. I sold Daniel's old truck. Used the money to start a small home design business. Nothing fancy, just helping new moms decorate nurseries and cozy spaces. I called it Second Nest Designs. It felt symbolic, rebuilding homes. The thing I almost lost. At night, when Nathan slept, I'd sit on the porch with a mug of tea, the crickets humming in the dark, and finally, I could breathe again. Months later, I bumped into one of Daniel's old co-workers at the farmer's market. He smiled awkwardly, like someone stepping around broken glass. Emma, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know what he was doing. I nodded. Neither did I. He hesitated. He's not doing great. He moved in with his cousin, lost most of his clients. I looked out across the rows of peaches and sunflowers, their colors glowing under the late morning sun. That's his path, I said gently. We all face the consequences of our choices. He nodded, then walked away, leaving me standing there with a basket of fruit and a strange, quiet peace. One evening, my mother sat beside me on the porch, Nathan asleep between us in his carrier. You know, she said, I'm proud of you, not just for fighting, but for how you carried yourself through it. I smiled faintly. Some days, I wanted to burn it all down. She chuckled softly. That's natural, but you didn't. You rebuilt instead. Her words settled in my chest like warmth after a long winter. Weeks turned into months, and I found a rhythm again, this time on my own terms. I learned that healing isn't a straight line. Some mornings, I'd wake up angry, others, grateful. There were days I missed the man I thought Daniel was, but not enough to want him back. I began to notice little things again. The way the morning light fell through the window, how Nathan's giggles echoed down the hallway, how the silence of our home now felt peaceful, not lonely. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't afraid of starting over, because starting over wasn't the same as losing. It was choosing myself. One quiet night, after putting Nathan to bed, I stood by the window watching the streetlights flicker. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, the slow climb back to peace. And in that stillness, I whispered something to myself. I forgive you. Not to Daniel. He wasn't here to hear it. It was to me. For trusting to his, for ignoring the signs, for believing that love meant never questioning. I forgave the version of me that stayed silent too long. A week later, I hosted a small dinner. Just family and a few close friends. Laughter filled the kitchen, the smell of roasted vegetables and cinnamon in the air. My mother raised her glass and said, to Emma and to every woman who learned that strength sometimes sounds like quiet. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, blinking back tears. She was right. That night, after everyone left, I put Nathan to sleep and walked through the house one last time before turning off the lights. Every corner held a story, but none of them owned me anymore. This was my home now, built from heartbreak, held together by resilience. And in the quiet, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes losing everything is how you find yourself. You know, family. When I look back on that chapter of my life, I don't remember the pain first. I remember the quiet strength it took to stand up, not in anger, but in truth. People think betrayal breaks you, and maybe it does, for a while. But sometimes, it also clears the noise, forces you to listen to that small, trembling voice inside that says, you still matter. I used to believe love meant trust, without question, that if I gave enough, believed enough, forgave enough, things would stay steady. But love, real love, doesn't hide behind forged papers or whispered lies. It doesn't ask you to shrink so someone else can shine. When Daniel signed that deed behind my back, he wasn't just taking a house, he was trying to erase the woman who built it, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, prayer by prayer. And for a moment, I let him, until I remembered that woman still had a name, a voice, a backbone. So to every woman listening right now, the one who's been lied to, silenced, or made to feel small in her own home, hear me when I say this: you do not owe anyone your quiet suffering. Speak up, ask questions, protect what's yours, not out of bitterness, but out of love for yourself, because forgiveness doesn't mean walking back into the fire. It means standing in the ashes and saying, I survived this. And sometimes, survival is enough. Now, I'll leave you with one question. My dear ones, if you found out the person you trusted most betrayed you this way, would you fight for what's yours, or would you walk away and start new? Tell me what your heart would do in the comments below. And if my story touched you today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Voices of Auntie May, where every story reminds us that even the quietest hearts have something powerful to say. Until next time, family, take care of your home, your peace, and your name, because those three things are sacred. Short summary: after giving birth and being placed on bed rest, a woman trusts her husband to handle their finances, but when she recovers, she discovers he secretly transferred their house into the name of his mistress, a real estate agent he'd been seeing behind her back. Shocked and heartbroken, she gathers evidence with her mother's help, confronts him, and exposes his betrayal. He tries to manipulate her, and even attempts to force the sale of their home, but she fights back legally and wins. In the end, she reclaims both her house and her dignity, realizing her true strength came not from revenge, but from choosing herself over his lies. Thumbnail: my husband transferred our house to another woman's name while I was on bed rest after giving birth. I lost everything I built, but I fought back, and this time, I chose myself. SEO: my husband transferred our house to her name while I was on bed rest. Description: when I was on bed rest after giving birth, I trusted my husband to handle everything, the bills, the papers, our home. But when I finally recovered, I discovered he had transferred our house to another woman's name, the woman he was secretly seeing. This is my story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the quiet fight to reclaim not just my home, but my dignity. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, this story will remind you strength can rise from the ruins. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you loved? Tell me in the comments below. #family betrayal, #real life story time, #Auntie May style, #cheating husband story, #emotional storytelling, #property betrayal, #voices of Auntie May.